the choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, kind of throwing moral relevance where it belongs, and moral relevance belongs in the trash, folks. It's another word, to use a Christian term, moral relevance is the temptation of evil. I'm not a Christian, folks, so I have my own words for it, but I know a good many of my listeners are Christian, so to put it in terms from your religion that you would understand, moral relevance, another way to put it, is a temptation of evil. And every little moral relevancy that you accept as commonplace and okay, the greater evils that can tempt you later. And I think I talked a little bit about that yesterday too, folks. So, but the conservative insurgency I'm talking about is somewhat like what Kurt Schlichter wrote about in his latest novel. Actually, it's his one and only novel. It's his fourth or fifth book. I'd have to count. I have them all, but I lost count on what they were. His previous ones were kind of essays that went around his wit and tongue-in-cheek and biting humor that he uses on Twitter and other places, and you've kind of published those. This is a work of conservative insurgency, is a work of fiction, kind of a future history thing, set in the year 2041 and looking back at how America was saved through a cultural war, a war of culture, not a clashing of armies or armed forces, but a kind of a turning of the culture back towards liberty, freedom, and freely choosing to be free and moral, instead of having the morality that somebody else decides thrust upon you, having your choices taken away, and having to pay a lot out for it. Because, folks, when you go out and work, you are selling your efforts, your time, and when I say your time, that means a portion of your life. So you're selling minutes of your life, or hours of your life, your skill, your talent, and your efforts at whatever the fair market value is, in return for a medium of exchange, otherwise money, that you could then use to get other things that you need, to barter for what you need, based on, again, fair market value. So, this is not a ploy for minimum wage hikes by any means, because, sorry, burger flippers you're a dime a dozen. You're unskilled labor. Doctor, on the other hand, is very skilled labor. So, fair market value of what you bring to the table, what kind of efforts you can give. But, now am I saying that a doctor is worth more than a burger flipper? Yeah, I am. Not burger flipper could aspire to be worth more by developing skills, going to school and working harder, coming up with a great idea for something that society would like the next smartphone. Who knows, maybe it's going to be a touch hologram instead of a touch screen, whatever. But right now, that doctor is worth more than that burger flipper. Sorry, it's the way things are. Doctor's worth more than I am. I know this. Look at our comparative salaries. So, without getting too deep into that, just remember that when the government is taking up to 1/3 of what you earn for yourself and saying, no, that's ours, you didn't build that, that's our money, and the 70% we leave you with is what we've decided you're worth. Not what you're really worth, but what we decided you're worth, because it's not really your money, it's not really your life you're spent, it's ours. When you're doing stuff like that, that's when it's time to look at the government and say, you're doing it wrong, stop, you're done. We're just not going to take it. And that doesn't mean an armed uprising, it means an uprising of votes and voters. So that's what Crowder's referring to. Can we win this peaceful coup, so to speak? Yes, I think we can, if that is what Crowder's talking about. Like I said, it's just my guess. So, there's my rant for today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all the ships at sea. So, what else is there left to talk about for the day? Ooh, I think we're running out of topics. Not! Anyway, let's talk about some Second Amendment stuff, folks. You know, I'm worried about my little hamster, so let's talk about something else that take my mind off of her health for a little bit. And then once the show's over with, I can go and give her all the love and attention that I can. Anyway, for those who haven't been keeping up with the latest, it's almost become a daily soap opera. The gun grabbers, the anti-constitutionalists, those who hate freedom and love tyranny, against those Americans who know that the best protection for themselves and their family is not the police but themselves. This butting of heads has been going on, and yes, it's a pivotal, it's an important issue. But the battles of the activists on both sides going back and forth have become somewhat entertaining, whether you've picked sides or not. And I've picked sides, flat out, in case you didn't catch it by the bias in my witty terms there. But the latest is Kroger is still holding firm that they're going to allow people who can carry concealed or open legally in public to still be allowed to do so in their stores. And a recent event just demonstrated why they think it's a good idea. Somebody attempted an armed robbery in one of Kroger's parking lots, and one of those duly armed, lawfully carrying, lawfully armed, free, independent citizens came to the rescue and stopped the armed robbery by using a lawfully and legally owned and legally employed firearm. Ooh, how about that? The police were minutes away, but seconds counted, and a good Samaritan, so to speak, a good citizen, law-abiding citizen who is legally and abiding those laws and carrying his firearm, thwarted an armed robbery that could have ended up with a lot of people hurt or harmed or killed by these criminals. So, Kroger's standing by their decision. Meanwhile, dun, 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 I'll let you think about that for a second. Now, joining all these restaurants who don't really want to take a stand one way or the other. They're fence sitters, folks, because none of them are posting what in Texas they call a 30-06 song. Other states have similar, but it's the legal sign with the proper language posted on the outside near the entrance at eye level with the text of at least a certain size, so it's clearly visible, stating that no firearms are allowed on these premises according to this code, the state code, blah blah blah. And in Texas, it's called 30-06 because that's the state code that covers what the sign has to look like. So the 30-06 signs need to be posted to actually ban firearms. So technically, if you're living in Texas or Arizona and you walk into a Chipotle who has kindly asked citizens to please leave the firearms at home, but they don't have the sign posted on their entrance door at eye level, and you have a concealed carry permit, or if you live in Arizona, you're carrying concealed or open, which you can do either legally as long as you're not a convicted felon, or if you're in Texas, you have a CHL, and you walk in and you're carrying, and you're properly carrying. They may or may not, depending on the manager's decision, and the color of his coffee that day, or her coffee that day, and how much brats the high school burger flippers or burrito makers are acting, or the unskilled workers who work there during the day when the kids are in high school, how bratty and dumb they're acting for the day. Depending on all that, may decide on whether or not they ask you kindly to leave or not. But they don't have to, and there's nothing posted that says you can't bring it in. They just kind of posted a policy letter saying, please don't. So, technically you still can. So it's fence sitting. Same thing with Target. Target is kind of wishy-washy back and forth also. And Walmart, there are no signs posted forbidding. Even if they did put a little sign up with that little circle and line through it saying no weapons allowed, unless they have the sign, the 30-06 sign, where they posted in the proper language, it's not a legal forbidding of the weapons on the premises. Well, the latest fence sitter to kindly ask their patrons to not bring their weapons in. Please don't. We're not going to stop you, but please don't. The latest one to do this is Panera Bread. And as the writer at BuzzPo has stated, I think it was Steve Ale that wrote this one, not to be confused with Stephen Crowder, Steve Ale, A-H-L-E. He wrote about Panera Bread is the latest one to say, please leave it at home. However, they don't have the 30-06 signs. Not yet, anyway. So what the author of that article ponders and asks is, how long until they have their first fatality due to an armed robbery from a criminal who cares less about the please don't bring it in sign? Because now they know that there are going to be fewer people possibly carrying in there. They're now a soft target. Because it's happened. It's happened numerous places. It's happened at pizza parlors. It's happened at Jack in the Box. In fact, I saw something posted. I think it was posted by C.J. Grisham over there at Open Carry, Texas. I was looking at his Facebook feed. May have been somewhere else, though. But there was a Jack in the Box sued because somebody went in there and was shot and killed by an armed robber. And the person who was shot and killed had a CHL, but decided to be respectful of the property owner's request. Although, like I said, without the 30-06 sign posted, it wasn't a legally binding ban or gun-free zone or whatever the hell you want to call it. But the guy was shot and killed. So the family is suing Jack in the Box because they prevented the person from being allowed a method of self-defense. So isn't that interesting, folks? We'll see how that one turns out. It would be interesting if the lawsuit actually went through and the decision was made against Jack in the Box. Because would that kind of start to change the statements made by places like Starbucks and Chipotle and Panera Bread? Be interesting. And I remember when Starbucks made theirs, because at first they were very open about people who openly carried, had no problem with it, and a couple of managers were even kind of happy about it. And then all of a sudden, corporate said, we're going to put out this policy letter. We're not banning them. We're going to ask people nicely to leave them at home, and that's a fair compromise. And it is a fair compromise. It's a way of staying out of the politics. They're basically saying, hey, we don't want the gun grabbers doing their crap here. We don't want to raise a controversy, so just keep your controversy outside. But that's not the way they worded it. That's what their intent was. But no, they let mothers demand tyranny over your rights as an individual, and Shannon Watts and her ilk to have a half victory with that. So, yeah. Other things going on, folks. Other things. We've made it through a little bit past half the show. And you know me, folks, I can pick a topic and I can talk and talk. I can go the next 20 to 25 minutes left of the show and just tell stories about my little truffle bear, my little teddy bear hamster who was sick today. But let's not bring you down. Instead, I'm not going to bring you down with that. Instead, let's look and see what's going on within our government. Maybe we got something to
You
joke
don't
about
have
there.
a right to know everything in a separation of powers government, my friend. That is the difference between a parliamentary government and a separation of powers government.
Separation of powers government, folks. Although it's not a complete separation of powers, there's a partial separation of powers in Great Britain, because the royal family and the royals and the House of Lords are all nobility, and they're separate from the little people, from the common people. That's why you have the House of Commons. It's separate from the House of Lords. So the nobles are separated. The powers that be are separated. Yeah, whatever. The Magna Carta and laws since then have kind of blurred that quite a bit. But still, there's a separation of powers when one of the royal couples is pregnant again. And you know, folks, I can't give you names because I don't follow that stuff. I can name the Queen. That's Queen Elizabeth. I can name the Prince of Wales. You know, that's Charles, Prince Charles. What's up, Chuck? Used to be what's up, Chuck, and die, but died. Too soon? Oh, come on now. It's been a decade. Anyway, so I can name them, but that's pretty much it. I don't sit there and play paparazzi, celebrity chase with the UK's royal family. They're not in charge of anything here within these borders. So I don't care. They don't pass our laws. Anyway, that's where you have a separation of power. So those of you looking at, the royal grandkids are expecting another great grandkid. So if you haven't heard yet, there's the news coming from me. For me, that's like saying, hey, Angelina Jolie just adopted another kid. That's nice. She can afford it. I'm glad somebody is adopting kids that need to be adopted. Good for her. Great. And she's a woman that can show a lot of love. And her father's a great American, too. So, yeah. But we're not going to talk about that kind of separation of powers. The separation of the celebrity powers there in Hollyweird. They can stay in Hollyweird. There are days that I half pray that the earthquake, like the one that hit San Francisco a week or two ago, would have just split the San Andreas and moved Hollywood into its own little island, and then we could declare it its own country and get rid of it. But that's half joking, folks. Actually, it's about 97% joking. Because there's some good Americans in California, like my buddy Kurt Schlichter. So we don't wish them harm. We just wish that their state government would get their rectal cranial inversion syndrome corrected and get with the program, along with states like Illinois, cities like Detroit. Think Detroit would have learned their lesson by now? Come on, folks. That people living in the urban area are going back to an agrarian society. Not that there's anything wrong with an agrarian society. I kind of like it myself. I like to ride horses, and I like to plant my own crops. I like to work the land and eat the fruit of my labors, so to speak. Something wholesome about that. But you're talking an urban area where people are now having to do communal farms to feed each other, or to feed themselves, because the jobs just aren't there. The city is bankrupt, and then some. So you think they would have learned their lesson. And then you have, other places like New York and Texas to death. Massachusetts, which I know I have one faithful listener at least in Texas to death. So, yeah. Where was I going with all that, folks? Well, Um,